It is 2:26 in the morning, Eastern Time, March 25, 2026. The President of the United States is awake, posting on social media. He types the word eager. Iran, he writes, is eager to make a deal. 2 time zones away, in a television studio in Tehran, Iran's foreign minister is sitting under studio lights telling the Iranian public something completely different. No negotiations have taken place. No negotiations are planned. We have not spoken to the American side. Both statements are made within hours of each other. Both statements are true in the way that 2 people describing the same car crash from different windows are both telling the truth. And while both men are speaking, the IRGC is in the air. Wave 81 of Operation True Promise 4, 70 targets, Haifa, Be'er Yaakov, Hadera, Tel Aviv, American bases in Bahrain, Jordan, Kuwait. The USS Abraham Lincoln reportedly forced to reposition at sea. Acclaimed F-18 shoot-down over the Chabahar area. Iran calling it the 4th American aircraft downed in this conflict. CENTCOM denied it before dawn. This is day 28. This is the moment the war and the diplomacy are running simultaneously, and neither side is describing the same reality. And I'm going to show you exactly what that means. For the ceasefire that is technically still on the table, for the oil market that moved 15% in 48 hours on the word negotiations, and for the household budget that is absorbing the downstream cost of every hour, this doesn't end. Stay with me. What Iran actually said. Before we get to the missiles, we have to understand what Araghchi said, because it is the most revealing thing either government has said publicly since February 28th. He stood at the podium and he drew a very precise line. There are no negotiations. But the United States, he said, has been sending messages through intermediaries, through friendly countries. Iran has been responding to those messages by stating its positions. He was careful to say, that is not negotiation, that is an exchange of messages through friends. And then he said the sentence that should have stopped the entire world. The fact that an enemy that was seeking our unconditional surrender is now talking about negotiations, requesting talks, and mobilizing its highest officials to negotiate with the Islamic Republic means accepting defeat. Read that again. Iran is not claiming military victory. Iran is claiming something more specific and more dangerous. It is claiming that the act of America initiating contact through intermediaries, after 28 days of demanding unconditional surrender, is itself a concession, a visible, public, geopolitically legible concession, one that every government watching this conflict has already recorded. He said something else, something quieter that got buried in the coverage. We want the war to end, but on our terms. In a way that ensures our enemies learn a lesson so they will not even contemplate attacking Iran again. And the damage suffered by the Iranian people must be compensated. That is not the language of a country that has been broken. That is the language of a country that has been devastated and is still standing and knows it. Then Wave 81 launched. The architecture of a negotiation nobody will call a negotiation. Here is the secret mechanism that is running right now, not in Geneva, not in a candlelit room with a Finnish diplomat carrying a briefcase, something more primitive and more dangerous. A relay race of paper between governments who are simultaneously trying to kill each other. Pakistan received the American ceasefire proposal and transmitted it to Tehran. Egypt helped draft its framework. Turkey confirmed it is passing messages between Washington and Tehran. These are not rumored back channels. Turkey's foreign affairs officials confirmed it to Reuters this week. Pakistan's foreign ministry has not denied it. Egypt has not denied it. The American position, a 15-point proposal, Araghchi acknowledged it. He said he saw it described that way in 1 or 2 places. He said the Americans had sent various proposals through intermediary countries. All of it, he said, has been transmitted to Iran's senior authorities. If a formal position needs to be taken, it will be taken. The Iranian position? A 5-point counter-proposal. Point 1, halt the killing of Iranian officials. Point 2, guarantee that no future war is waged against Iran. Point 3, reparations for the destruction of war. Point 4, full cessation of hostilities. Point 5, Iran's sovereign exercise of control over the Strait of Hormuz. That 5th point. Let's be precise about what it is. The Strait of Hormuz is 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. Through it, approximately 21 million barrels of oil pass every single day. That is 20% of the world's total oil supply moving through a waterway that Iran is now claiming the right to control as a matter of sovereign authority. That is not a diplomatic demand. That is a restructuring of the world energy order. It is the one demand designed to be refused. Which means And here is what nobody in the briefing rooms will say out loud, but everyone is thinking. It may be a deliberate anchor, a starting position, something to trade away in exchange for a guarantee that the United States will never do this again. The architecture of a negotiation that neither side will call a negotiation, running through Islamabad and Ankara and Cairo in the dark hours of a Thursday morning while missiles are in the air over Haifa. The crack between Washington and Jerusalem. Now here is the detail that changes everything about what the 15-point proposal actually means. Netanyahu was surprised. According to multiple US officials speaking to the Associated Press on condition of anonymity, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his war cabinet were not briefed in advance on the contents of the American ceasefire proposal. They learned about it the same way some of them apparently found out about last week's diplomatic push, through journalists. Let that land. The United States and Israel launched this war together. 200 American fighter jets, B-1s, B-2 bombers, flying from Diego Garcia, 3,800 miles from Tehran. The USS Gerald R. Ford launching combat sorties every day for 28 consecutive days. They launched this war together. And now, 28 days in, Washington is drafting ceasefire language that Israel's prime minister didn't receive advance notice of. This is not an accident. This is the architecture of a crack. Netanyahu has been the internal hardliner in this conflict in ways that have repeatedly complicated Washington's position. On March 19th, he held a press conference and was asked directly whether Trump approved the Israeli strike on Iran's South Pars natural gas field. His answer: fact number 1, Israel acted alone against the Walia gas compound. Fact number 2, President Trump asked us to hold off on future attacks, and we're holding off. He said it publicly, on camera, while the US was passing a ceasefire proposal through Pakistani intermediaries to Tehran, while that same South Pars strike had just pushed Brent crude toward $120 a barrel and triggered Iranian retaliatory strikes on Saudi refineries, Qatar's Ras Laffan energy hub and the Mina al-Ahmadi refinery in Kuwait. Trump asked Israel to hold off. Israel struck anyway. Netanyahu announced the sequence publicly. And Washington kept trying to sell Tehran on the ceasefire framework through Islamabad. This is the geometry of the trap that Iran's foreign minister is describing when he refuses to call any of it negotiation. Iran has a very specific memory of what American diplomacy looks like when it is being run in parallel with Israeli military operations. The Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson said it plainly this week. We have a very catastrophic experience with US diplomacy. He used the word catastrophic. He is referring specifically to the February 28th strikes, which landed while Oman's foreign minister, who had just declared publicly that Iran had agreed to never stockpile enriched uranium, that peace was within reach, was watching what he later called the deliberate undermining of active, serious negotiations. A UK national security advisor had reportedly attended secret US-Iran nuclear talks in Geneva before the war began. His assessment, a diplomatic breakthrough was possible. Then the bombs fell. His assessment became the epitaph on a diplomacy that was killed before it could succeed. Iran is not going to walk into that room a third time without understanding the geometry of who is in it. The economics of the word eager. Trump posted the word eager at 2:26 in the morning. Markets opened and Brent crude fell 15% in 48 hours. That is the single most important economic fact of the last week. Not the missiles, not the naval repositioning, not Wave 81. The word eager moved the global oil price by 15% in 2 days. Think about what that tells you about how tight the margin is. Before the war, Brent crude was approximately $70 a barrel. It has now run as high as $120 during the conflict. It has currently pulled back toward $100 to $106 on the negotiation rumors alone. Goldman Sachs is projecting elevated prices through 2027. The IEA released a record 400 million barrels from emergency reserves. That release buys time, not resolution. At $100 crude, the conflict surcharge on your household is approximately $50 to $70 per month in fuel costs compared to February 27th. At $120, it was $100 to $130. If the strait closes fully and the industry models hit, $200 crude within 72 hours of a declared blockade, $250 within 2 weeks. Gasoline nationally hits $9 per gallon, above $11 in California. The S&P 500 falls 15 to 20% before the weekends. Trump posted eager at 2:26 in the morning because the alternative, acknowledging that this war has no defined endpoint, crashes markets he cannot afford to crash. That is not a criticism, that is the math. The domestic political cost of $9 gasoline in an election cycle year is the single most powerful lever Iran has in any negotiation. not its missiles, not its strait closure. The knowledge that the American president cannot politically survive what happens to the economy if the strait stays closed for 3 more months. Aragchi knows this. The 5-point proposal knows this. The 5th point about Hormuz sovereignty is calibrated precisely to that knowledge. The human cost underneath all of it. Before the scenarios, before the forecasts, before the indicators, this. More than 1,444 Iranians confirmed killed since February 28th, at least 204 of them children, over 18,000 injured, 17 American service members dead, 13 confirmed killed in hostile or operational incidents, 15 Israelis killed, more than 1,000 dead in Lebanon, 80 Iraqi security forces killed. In Israel, more than 5,200 people have been injured since the war began. The cumulative weight of 81 waves of missiles, cluster submunitions scattering across urban blocks, interceptor debris falling on residential streets, sirens every night, 3 a.m. becoming a time people recognize the way they used to recognize sunrise. A 26-year-old graduate student in Tehran told a reporter, "There have been some days when the bombings are so intense you can't do anything." The Golistan Palace, a UNESCO World Heritage Site in Tehran, damaged by airstrike debris, 65 schools struck, 14 medical centers, more than 10,000 civilian sites damaged, according to Iranian accounting. 2 elderly residents killed in Ramat Gan by cluster warhead submunitions that scattered across their neighborhood. 3 women at a hair salon in the West Bank, struck by cluster munition debris from an overhead intercept. 9 civilians dead in a single strike in Beit Shemesh on March 1st, the largest single civilian death toll from one Iranian strike inside Israel. These are not statistics. These are the people who live inside the diplomatic framework being passed through Islamabad. Their lives are what the 15-point proposal and the 5-point counter-proposal are actually negotiating over. When Pete Hegseth went on television and said, "We negotiate with bombs," this is the population absorbing that doctrine. 3 paths from the 15-point question scenario. 1. The relay race produces a pause. The back-channel framework, Pakistan transmitting, Turkey passing, Egypt framing, produces enough overlap between the American 15 points and the Iranian 5 to justify an in-person meeting, reportedly as soon as this week in Pakistan. Not peace, not a deal, a pause. Bombers stand down. Missiles are holstered. The Strait moves from 5 ships per day toward 30. Brent crude retreats toward $80. The Goldman Sachs 2027 timeline becomes a risk scenario rather than a forecast. The Fed's options reopen. Your gas pump moves in the right direction. The key indicator: watch Oman's foreign minister. Badr bin Hamad al-Busaidi watched the last framework collapse on February 28th and said he was dismayed. If he issues any statement referencing positive momentum or constructive contacts, the relay race has produced something. Scenario 2, Iran's 5th point becomes the wall. The Hormuz sovereignty demand proves genuinely non-negotiable rather than a strategic anchor. Washington cannot accept it. Tel Aviv doesn't want it accepted. The 15-point framework collapses through the back channel without a public announcement. Trump's eager post is quietly forgotten. The IRGC launches Wave 82. Netanyahu, freed from the diplomatic pause, approves strikes on targets Washington has been asking him not to hit. Power plants, Bushehr's proximity to nuclear facilities, infrastructure that once struck cannot be unstruck. Iran announces a formal, declared strait closure. Oil hits $200 before the week ends. The 82nd Airborne's paratroopers already in transit land at a Gulf airfield. The 5,000 Marines steaming toward the Persian Gulf arrive into an active maritime combat zone. The key indicator: any Israeli government statement that explicitly does not reference American coordination for a coming strike. Netanyahu has shown he will announce unilateral action publicly. The absence of American coordination language in an Israeli strike announcement is the tell. Scenario 3. The negotiation nobody will name produces something unnamed. Neither side formally agrees to anything. Neither side formally walks away. The relay race keeps running. Iran fires Wave 82, but at reduced intensity, continuing the pattern of managed attrition rather than escalation. The IRGC calibrates each wave to maintain pressure without exhausting stockpiles. The strait stays at 5 to 15 ships per day. Not open, not formally closed, enough for China's yuan-denominated oil arrangements and India's bilateral deal to function while the broader market remains disrupted. The world adjusts to $100 crude as the new floor. Goldman Sachs's projection becomes current reality. The ceasefire proposal sits in Islamabad, neither accepted nor rejected, while both sides fight and talk and deny that they are talking. The key indicator, the week-over-week straight transit count. If Lloyd's List intelligence shows the count moving from 5 ships per day to 15 or 20 without any formal announcement from either side, you are watching a de facto undeclared partial opening. The market will price it within 48 hours, and both governments will deny they had anything to do with it. What to watch the Omani foreign minister's next statement? He watched the last diplomatic framework collapse on February 28th. He was in the room for what almost was. His language, specifically his language about whether back-channel contacts are active and meaningful, is the most honest public signal available about whether the relay race is producing anything real. The FA-18 investigation. CENTCOM denied the Wave 81 shoot-down claim within hours. They did not release operational data. This is the 4th Iranian aircraft claim since February 28th. One of the previous 3 produced a confirmed F-35 emergency landing that is still under investigation 7 days later with no public findings. The pattern of claims and unexplained incidents is itself a message to global defense communities. Watch for any CENTCOM operational summary that changes its language from air superiority framing. The April 19th sanctions waiver. The Trump administration lifted sanctions on 140 million barrels of Iranian oil to manage domestic energy prices while at war with Iran. That waiver expires in 23 days. Extending it is an acknowledgement that the conflict's economic cost exceeds what military means can resolve on the current timeline. Watch Treasury Department communications in the week of April 12th, the next Netanyahu press conference. He has demonstrated a pattern of publicly announcing information, including information that contradicts White House framing, in ways that complicate diplomatic backchannels. If he holds a press conference in the next 72 hours referencing Israeli operational freedom or the inadequacy of current strike restraint, the backchannel is in trouble regardless of what Islamabad is carrying. And the oil futures market as Sunday night open. After the eager post moved crude 15% in 2 days, the next significant move in oil futures will tell you what the institutional money actually believes about whether the pause is real, not the headlines. The futures. The people with the most to lose are the most honest price signal available. Trump says Iran is eager to make a deal. Arakchi says there are no negotiations. Both statements were made within hours of each other. Both were made while Wave 81 was in the air. A 15-point American proposal is sitting in Tehran, transmitted through Pakistan. A 5-point Iranian counter-proposal is sitting in Washington, transmitted through Turkey. Neither side will call any of this negotiation. Jonathan Powell attended secret nuclear talks in Geneva before the war began and assessed that a breakthrough was possible. Then the bombs fell on February 28th. The Omani foreign minister called it what it was, the deliberate undermining of active diplomacy. The men in Islamabad carrying messages are still awake tonight. The ceasefire proposal is still technically on the table. Brent crude is at $106 and Goldman Sachs says plan for 100 plus through 2027. 13 US service members dead, over 1,444 Iranians killed, more than 18,000 injured, 204 children. The IRGC has now launched 81 waves of missiles. Iran's arsenal has been devastated, its command structure decapitated, its navy declared combat ineffective, and the missiles are still flying. We negotiate with bombs, the US Defense Secretary said. Iran answered it at 3:07 in the morning with Wave 81. There are 2 futures available from where we are tonight. In one, the relay race running through Islamabad and Ankara and Cairo produces a pause. Not peace, not a deal, a pause. And the word eager turns out to have been true in the only way that matters. In the other, the 5th point about Hormuz sovereignty becomes the wall that nothing gets past, and what comes next is something neither side has a plan for. The men passing paper between governments that are trying to kill each other are still at their desks. The question is whether the paper arrives before the next wave does. And that answer, whichever way it goes, shows up at your gas station, on your grocery receipt, and on the monthly statement for every debt obligation you carry. This is not abstract geopolitics. This is right now. The next move belongs to whoever is still alive to make it.